Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate, the Championship podcast. And I'm delighted to be joined by my first guest, which is Jonny Bullock from the excellent Boro Breakdown. Jonny, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for your time. I get the sense that Boro fans are feeling a lot more optimistic after that 2-1 victory over Southampton.
Yeah, firstly, thank you for having me on. I always love coming on and speaking to you, Gab. I feel like we need to speak more often. But yeah, Middlesbrough fans are really happy after Saturday. And obviously last night we beat Bradford in the Cup, and the parallels of 2003, 2004, when we won the Carling Cup are really coming true. And that was when we won the Carling Cup 2003, 2004. We had our worst start the season, which is also very parallel to that season. And also, we're winning in the Cup at the same time. We have an Australian goal at this point. Joseph Job was born in France. Latif speaks French. Like all the parallels, everything's coming together. So we're just going to announce the Carabao Cup winners this year. I think just based on history on that side. But
someone's had one too many Parmos. Just enjoying those, just making you feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think the win on Saturday was massive on it. I think it was weird that we all said in our podcast that we'd win the game, and I think there's just something about Southampton where they're easy to play against, and I don't know what I think it's just the expansive style of what Russell Martin brings. It's a little bit messy, and once you get that press right, they're there and you can cut them up. And I think Boro did that really well against them on the Saturday. But I'd be frustrated if I was a Southampton fan for sure. A team that hasn't won a game yet all season turns them over, and it was a big win for us as well. I think confidence is massive, but the performances haven't been too bad. They have been bad in some parts, but I think hopefully this is the time gap where we start to click now and things start to move in the right direction for us.
Sure. I think we can say with a lot of confidence, Jonny, that the creativity in this squad is absolutely there. What we've discussed when you've been on this podcast previously, partly the conversion issues, which great that you scored 2 goals against Southampton and came from behind as well, but also what you mentioned in terms of pressing the Saints and maybe being a bit more aggressive against the ball. Not something I've seen from Middlesbrough. I definitely wanted more from them in that regard. Great to see that they've delivered on that front, and hopefully that can be the benchmark going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's what you definitely want. And last year we were much better at pressing than we have been in this season. We adjusted our system ever so slightly back to that 3-2-5, which we played quite a lot last year under Carrick, where we'd move everyone to the right hand side, let the left back go forward and bomb, and then we'd have 5 forwards up front, and that system really worked. We moved to that 4-2-4 shape, wasn't really working. And then we've kind of slowly moved into different systems as the game goes on. A 3-2-5. It was a 4-1-4-1 at some point on Saturday. I think 4-2-3-1 as well. So playing with multiple shapes, which is really cool and interesting to see. But that pressing side was so much better, on the front foot, pressing with numbers and really breaking Southampton down. I hope we continue it as well, Gab, because the more we sit back and the more we let teams play against us, the more opportunity they're going to create chances against us. And you know what our defence is like. We don't keep many clean sheets. So for us, winning the ball back early is really key. And we just haven't done it in previous games. So I'm hoping that we do that and we get get a good win against Watford, because it'd be massive if we did.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Jonny, about Hayden Hackney, because I think last season under Michael Carrick, he was sort of this scuttling midfielder that would sort of get around the pitch. And I suppose for the 1-1 draw at Sheffield Wednesday, Johnny Ison was dropped. And I felt as though Hackney was asked to get on the ball and dictate things a little bit more. And I'm still a little bit, perhaps you'll tell me otherwise, Jonny, I'm still a little bit not sure about him, whether he's got the whole skill set to be a sort of a conductor type. But do you think that we're going to see a bit more of him in that kind of role this season?
I would like him to, yeah, absolutely. I think I don't want you to mention Sheffield Wednesday again, because I feel like that first half was very much rock bottom of our season. So I'll skip any part of that. But Hayden Hackney, yeah, I think he can play that role, Gab. I do. When we were watching him for the under-21s for England, he seemed to play that role as like just a single pivot and was really pivotal in a pivot in trying to get these get the three lines forward, and they were doing really well. He's really that dictator of the pitch and a good passing, and he's got a good ability as well, and he's got a good eye to create things as well. So I think he does have that skill set.
Okay.
It's just can you unlock it? And he's still very young, isn't he? And I think
Sure.
he'll always develop. His game might change. Like we spoke the last time I spoke to you, I said about Nicky Bailey being on the left wing, and then he turned to defensive midfielder. So things can definitely change in his career. I would like to see him in a bit higher up, actually, in a number 10. I would like to see him in that position just to see how he
But
would
you've
cope
got a
with it.
lot of quality in those sorts of
We do,
areas, though,
yeah.
Johnny.
Yeah.
So is there the space to necessarily give him that sort of role?
Well, that's it. It's always like a test and learn, isn't it, in football? And the reason why I say that number 10 role is because last year, I don't know if you can recall it, but he played on that left-hand side just a little bit. Every now and again, he looked to play in that role, and he scored a couple of goals in that position. He was very creative. He had that freedom to play, and you never know. I feel like if you just moved him up a little bit more, you could potentially see that. But Middlesbrough are looking at the moment where if we're playing Josh Coburn up front, we need someone off him. So you would need probably a little bit more mobility with like a Laugh or Morgan Rogers. Can they play that role? If your Hackney was playing there, you'd have to play two up front, and then you'd talk about like a single pivot, aren't you? And you're maybe talking about a diamond, which I don't think would suit Boro at the moment. So it's something there for maybe in the future, but not for right now.
That makes a lot of sense. How do you think some of the recruits are sort of settling in so far? Because I look at some of the lads he brought in, like Sammy Silvera from Down Under, and Morgan Rogers, of course, as well. And I look at them and I think they've all shown flashes so far this season of what they can do. But I also look at one or two of them. It's certainly been true of Morgan Rogers previously in his career, and bits and pieces I've seen from Silvera as well, where I just want to see them just get that sprint mentality where they'll chase someone back and just or go and press someone. I don't feel like they've necessarily got that just yet. I wonder if that's something that something for them to work on possibly.
Yeah, the recruitment for us it has been hit and miss at the minute. I think it's still very early. You know, players can really develop in 12 months' time and start to come good. The one sign I would say that I'm a big fan of at the moment is Rav van den Berg. He has just younger than Josh Coburn, 18, 19-year-old now.
Right back, isn't he?
He's been playing right back, but it's funny that before he came to Middlesbrough, he actually wasn't really playing right back at all. He was actually a centre half, and we've put him to this right back role, and he's just started to slowly get better and better, and you can just see the quality and the maturity in his play. And for an 18, 19-year-old to play the way that he's playing is really special, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. And like over the season, he's going to make mistakes. All young players do. And for me, he's the one player where I'm looking at and going, wow, we could make a few million off you in a few years. And we've got him on a 4-year deal. A lot of big clubs were after him as well at the time. So we've managed to win a really big race and getting him in. So really exciting to see what he can do. I would like to see him in that central position in the future, but that right back role, it suits him to a T at the moment. Keep him out wide, let him learn the game, let him learn English football and just slowly start to build on it. But yeah, the other players that you were mentioning there, Sammy Silvera, I think he's trying too hard. I don't know what
Oh,
it is.
really? You think he's trying too hard?
He's trying too hard to make the right decision. Is kind of the thing. He's like he just does some stupid things. You just go, oh my goodness, stop putting too much whip in it, or just finish a chance in it. I feel like he overthinks it. And I just think that's the reason why we don't see the best out of him. But I would agree with you. I'd like to see him come back more and work a little bit harder and try and show those flashes of what we can see from him. But yeah, I think the disappointments have probably been Silvera for now and Engel as well, who I was really big on. But it just looks like we've kind of he was awful against Sheffield Wednesday. I feel he got exposed quite a bit. But the games prior to that, he was actually okay. I think it's just that game was a bit of a kick the stuff out of him, to be honest. But we'll see how he's integrated back in. But overall, I think the signs have been okay. They're so young. All the signs have been really young. So they're going to have these great moments, and lesser good moments as well.
Do
So
you think, just to jump in on that, Johnny, do you think that's part of why we've seen Boro struggle a little bit so early on, because you've still got a lot of players that are adapting to the Championship?
Absolutely.
And then how confident are you that you're going to put a run together now? Because you don't want to leave it too late, do you?
Yeah, we left it quite late last year, to be honest. But this year, yes, there's a lot of changes, and I don't think it's no secret really when you have 7 players, well, 8 players if you want to count Corbyn. Last year we were at the club, we're in the starting 11 against Southampton, so that connection's already there. So is it just a case of drip feeding these players back into the team, and as the relationships start to build, Boro will start to come good. I think we will come good. I still feel really confident that we've got enough about us to get to where we want to be. Will it be promotion? I'm not too sure. But can we still fight for those playoffs? I think we can. I really do think we can. Last year, we were still in the bottom 3 at this point. We're at the bottom 3 in the middle of October and November. And then we started to really climb. So there is time for us to do it. I'm just hoping that we start to put something together now where even if it's like 2 wins and a loss, or 1 win, 1 draw, loss, or just start, as long as we start picking up these odd wins, I think we'll start to improve.
Well, let's hope that's the case. Johnny, it's been great to have you on. Keep up the great work with the podcast, and speak to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Gav. Thanks for having me on, mate.
Cheers, pal. Delighted to introduce my next guest, which is Mark Manderfield from the 11 It's Heaven from Jamie Vardy podcast. How are you, Mark?
I'm good, thanks, Gabriel. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thanks. Thanks for joining us ahead of tonight's trip to Anfield. Last time you came on, I sort of injected a little bit of maybe uncertainty over the performance levels for Leicester City in that first month of the campaign. But you've got to say the record now: 7 wins, 1 defeat in 8 games. Pretty compelling, and you've probably got it in you to maybe even find another gear if you need to. But it's been fantastic start, hasn't it?
Yeah, I hate to say I told you so, but I did say last time I came on that I felt we were going to hit another gear. And a big night for us was obviously we had the defeat against Hull, and the big night for us then was how we got on it at Southampton away, and really we tore them apart that evening. It was comfortable-ish against Norwich, 2 of the biggest sides in the division, and then really what was a 1-0 battering at the weekend against Bristol City. It was defence versus attack, so it was. It's been really, really good. We're all enjoying the Championship at the minute.
Sure. Who would you say have been Leicester's top performers so far this season, Mark?
Well, there'll be a surprise one that I'll start with, and that'll be Yannick Vestergaard. So he's come back in from the cold. He was a figure of fun, really, for a lot of the fan base over the course of the last couple of years. He's come back in. He's been really solid at centre back, but you have to look in the midfield and look at Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, who's been really solid. He probably tries a little bit too hard at different points in terms of caring about the club. And then on the wing, Steffi Mavadidi, who has been a revelation since we've brought him in from Montpellier. So a really, really good sort of start to the season, and some players playing out their skin. It will probably also be fair to mention Callum Doyle, who's had a really good start for us, but unfortunately, he's crocked now, and he's going to be for quite a while. So that's going to be a bit of a problem for us.
Yeah, that's far from ideal. But I do want to go back to what you said there about Yannick Vestergaard, because I suppose when you think of the way Enzo Maresca's side like to play, you think of that high line playing out from the back. You wouldn't necessarily think of Yannick Vestergaard being particularly quick, and I'm not sure I'd have associated him with him being great on the ball. So has he sort of surprised you in either of those attributes, or have you been able to find a way of sort of getting around that?
Yeah, he's been good on the ball, and that has been something that he's sort of brought to the team over a period of time. So that's why he's been preferred to Harry Souttar, because of his distribution, his ability to spray passes out, and how comfortable he is on the ball. I would agree that I was as concerned as you were around the lack of pace that he's got in terms of getting turned and having defenders run at him. But him and Wout Faes have built up a good, solid partnership. And with Harry Winks in front of them, who I failed to mention on your earlier question, which feels like a bit of a stab in his back, really, because he's been absolutely fantastic for us so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? I think I talk to fans of other clubs like Middlesbrough and Southampton, where a lot of their, also similarly to Leicester, I suppose, expected to challenge for promotion this season, but they went very sort of youth heavy, I suppose, in their recruitment in certain areas. And actually, Leicester have got criticised for spending 10 million or 9 million, it might have been, on Harry Winks, and something similar on Connor Cody, who hasn't actually played much yet. But I just look at it and I think, maybe considering that you sold James Maddison for 40 million, Harvey Barnes for 38, I think it was. Actually, whether it was probably worth it just to spend an extra few quid on getting some experienced heads in, because you do need those players who bring that bit of know-how, bring that bit of assurance at crucial moments, because that's how you get over the line.
And that's why Leicester are in the Championship this season, because we didn't have players like that. We had enough talent to stay in the Premier League last year, but didn't have the nous and the know-how and the experience and the cool heads and the leadership. So that's what certainly Harry Winks brings to the side. It's what Connor Cody will bring to the side as well. But sprinkled in with all of that experience, you've got players that are taking their chance when they're getting it. So we look at Casey McAteer on the right wing. He's been a revelation since he's been in the starting 11 this season, and he was getting played at right wing back in the under-23s last year,
Right.
or left wing back. Sorry, not really doing anything. It would have been on no one's lips really that he was going to come in and be a potential starter.
It's so strange just to jump on McAteer. He had a loan spell. I can't. Was it at Forest Green? He had his loan spell, or
AFC
it was
Wimbledon.
certainly AFC Wimbledon, yeah. I don't think he's necessarily torn up trees when he's gone out on loan, and that's been at sort of League One, League Two type of level. So it's kind of just been a real surprise. But I think that what that shows is the coaching ability of Maresca, that he can sort of develop these players and that he's open-minded enough to bring them in.
Yeah, absolutely. Leicester fans are in love with Maresca. It's fair to say that. We've all got a bald mate that we think is a bit Enzo-like at the minute. So it's a fantastic time to be a Leicester supporter the way that we've started this season. But it's nice to see the whole club pulling in the same direction, and that's not been the case for certainly a few years towards the end of the Brendan Rodgers era. So yeah, Enzo Maresca, I think he's going to be a great coach. I think he's going to be up there with some of the best in time because of his philosophy, what he demands. You know, the Southampton game when we won 4-1, he was on the pitch at the end having a bit of a go at Kiernan Dewsbury Hall because I think he'd misplaced a couple of passes. And that's the standard that he set.
Do you know what? I think Leicester fans love that as well, because I remember you had Nigel Pearson and you beat, I think it was last day of 14-15, you beat QPR 5-1, and Pearson was fuming that you hadn't kept a clean sheet. And it's that sort of perfectionism that I think fans can really take to.
I think the exciting thing, Gabriel, as well, is that I don't think we've quite hit top form yet. I think we were close to it at Southampton. That was a really dominant display.
Sure.
But you know, this Sunday going to Ewood Park, it'll be a tough game, but I don't think it'll hold much fear for us. I think we will feel that we can go there and win.
Yeah, absolutely, and best luck with that and for the rest of the season, because I've been really impressed with the start that you've made. But yeah, you've got to continue to up your standards as well, and I'm sure you'll do that under Maresca. Best luck for Liverpool tonight, mate, and I'm sure I'll catch you later in the season.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mark. Brilliant to get Mark on from the 11 It's Heaven from with Jamie Vardy podcast. Delighted to introduce my next guest, which is Rich from the Blue Monday podcast. How are you, Rich?
I'm very good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, delighted to get stuck in from one team with 21 points out of a possible 24 to another. You must be absolutely over the moon. I suppose Leicester came down kind of expecting this start, with Ipswich maybe not quite to the same extent. So just talk us through what the mood is among the Blue Army at the moment.
Yeah, it's buoyant, definitely, Gab. I mean, at the moment, the last two home games, either we give teams a 2-goal head start, or we let them peg us back from 3-1 down to 3-3, and even then we can't not win. It's just staggering, Gab. And what's great is, you know, it's not as if this is going to be in a slow burn. and we've kind of been building over a few years and got to this point. We've had absolute misery, and there'll be teams out there whose sides are, at the crest of a wave at the moment. Hull fans, for example, I can think similarly to them, and there'll be others that I'm forgetting as well.
Preston, I suppose.
Preston,
really
maybe. I mean, Preston haven't got relegated like we have, though, and we've had some real tough years. I'm not going to pretend, there are teams who have had it tougher, of course, but the just immediate turnaround we've had since the new owners came in, and Kieran McKenna particularly, well, I'm sure we'll talk more about in the next few minutes. It's just staggering. And then to have the success we did at the end of last season, went on an amazing run, and that momentum that we've created both on and off the field is really putting us in a strong position. And as you said, we haven't got the resources of some teams at this level. That's not to say we haven't spent money, and of course we have in League One. But relatively speaking, it's not tens of millions of pounds. It's it's £3 million we spent in the summer for George Hurst and Jack Taylor, and a similar sum for Harry Clark and Nathan Broadhead previously as well in January. And it's just coming together, Gab. And what's great is last night against Wolves, we made 10 changes, but the whole McKenna philosophy remains the same regardless of the personnel. There's no panic. We know exactly our positions. We know our style of play, our patterns. We know that we're going to create chances. And it's just great to see it happening a level up.
The big thing when I watch Ipswich, Rich, that stands out to me is that there's always a plan for what to do when you lose the ball. Now, I suppose I'm contradicting myself a little bit in saying at home, defensively, there's definitely room for improvement, because three on Saturday against Blackburn, 4 against Leeds, but I just generally I think there's this sort of strategy where there's always one person behind the ball. There's this sort of the equilibrium, if you like, just seems to be so smooth. And I look at other teams like Southampton who are trying to implement the same style that you've described, and they've not really had a plan for what to do if the ball gets turned over. It looks like chaos. To me, with Ipswich, it doesn't look like chaos. It looks like it's so well organised. You're even well organised when you're in possession, expanding out and creating space. And for me, that just speaks volumes for the work Kieran McKenna's doing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's nothing... You kind of get the sense, and I'm sure it's not that, because you need to give the players credit as well, but you get the sense that our patterns of play are so well drilled that they're instinctive now. They're in the players' heads. And as you say, and I mentioned it last night, 10 changes against Wolves. The players that came in, it maybe took them a while to get up to speed, and obviously the quality of position, Premier League players there. I know Wolves made a lot of changes as well, but there was £10 million players in their team last night and £35 million players on their bench. But McKenna's meticulousness, the attention to detail. He's got a great backroom team as well. They're very analytical. I was fortunate to be sat behind the dugouts last night. I usually sit behind the goal with a noisy lot. And McKenna is just constantly analysing, constantly checking things, encouraging players. He's always looking at what the opposition is doing as well. I think that's another key thing. You mentioned Southampton, Gab. I think Russell Martin, is perhaps soldiering on with his philosophy in spite of the obvious objective facts that it's not working or it needs more time. And I don't think Kieran McKenna would let that happen. We had some really tricky spells in League One where we were maybe a little bit naive, or teams were bully us or sitting with a low block. And it took McKenna a few weeks to figure it out, but he came up with a plan. And I think that's the difference with a lot of managers at this level. And we had it with, I don't want to badmouth Paul Cook, but he was very rigid with his tactical philosophy in the face of clear evidence it wasn't working. And, McKenna does have that flexibility, but as you say, the core fundamentals are always the same. And it really helps us. And as I said, because we haven't really had to change the style of play from moving from League One to the Championship, unlike maybe Sheffield Wednesday, for example, who definitely designed the team to get out of League One, but hadn't really thought about what was waiting for them when they got there. We are really benefiting from that now, and Kieran McKenna's foresight and kind of, constant development and tinkering of the side. But as I said, the players know their jobs. It's really key.
Absolutely. I suppose there's a couple of sort of questions that I want to try and unpick, and maybe it feels a bit early because we're under 10 games in, and games in, and I don't want to go too early on Ipswich, but in terms of what can be achieved, I remember doing the podcast with you and you and Seb on Blue Monday. You're very sensible, level-headed chaps, and you're saying, "No, if we finish 10th, I'll be absolutely delighted. That'd be brilliant progress." And I kind of went with that. There was a bit of me thinking, "Oh, could Ipswich get into the playoffs?" And then I kind of ended up going with you. But now I'm almost regretting I didn't go a bit more ambitious with Ipswich, because it almost feels now like playoffs seems like top 6 seems like a likelihood.
Yeah, well, we were doing the maths on the podcast on Sunday night, the guys, and given the start we've had, they were hypothesizing that we could get away with mid-table form between now and the rest of the season and get 75 points. They actually did the maths for it. That's how good the start has been. In terms of predictions at the start of the season, I think, I think we were a lot of people's kind of hipster choice, and for good reason. McKenna's got a really good reputation around him. The team have obviously had this relentless run at the end of last season into League One, and we know that momentum sometimes parlays its way into the new season. So it wasn't a crazy suggestion, but I still think there are teams with better squads on paper than we saw that with Leeds, who rocked up with Nonto, Sinistera, Ruta, and others, and Pirro, and just just cut us to the sword. And saw that to an extent last week with Blackburn, with Schmonitz, who scored a worldie as well. We've got those individual players in the team, but maybe not as many as others. So there's nothing to say that the run can't continue. We're going to lose some games at some point, but we've put ourselves in a really strong position now, Gab, and it makes people like me, who are very rarely like to get ahead of themselves and optimistic, it puts us in a really tricky position. But there is pinch yourself times right now watching Ipswich Town, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm still conscious that this is primarily a squad that's come up from League One, as opposed to a squad that's come down from the Premier League and
It's a side that's dominated League One as well, though.
True.
It's worth. I mean, I know Plymouth obviously got a few more points as well as us as well, but this is a team that was absolutely functional, like ridiculously functional at the end of last season.
Although Sheffield Wednesday were actually threatening to run away with it if you go back to February.
Yeah, you could argue that we got our timings right. I guess that's a fair challenge, but nevertheless, it was the style of play, Gab, the age of the players,
I'm totally with you on that,
the recruitment. Harry Clark, as I mentioned, Massimo Luongo, George Hurst, Nathan Broadhead. These are players with championship experience, not great and vast championship experience, but championship experience nevertheless. And you look at the players, again, no disrespect to Plymouth, because they won the league and they were great, but they were recruiting in a very different strategy to us, which is working great for them. Sheffield Wednesday similarly didn't really sign anyone either. And I get your point though. The championship, I always kind of, when we chatted about League One, it did feel like there was like the top half of of League One, with teams with pretty decent resources, probably down on the luck, shouldn't be down there, but we're generally okay. Then you had the functional teams, the progressive teams who were trying to push their way into that top half. And then there was a whole lot of other people who were just happy to be there. The championship isn't really like that, but you have the parachute teams just massively skewing the quality. We were just chatting with Leicester, Jamie Vardy being in a championship team is just nuts, isn't it? And there are other players like Connor Cody and Harry Winks. It's just crazy, isn't it? So I take your point that, I've mentioned Leeds as well. Leeds to me are, if you were to pick a top two right now, I would say Leeds and Leicester.
Right? I'd have to go along.
I wouldn't be putting us in the mix, but we've given ourselves a really good chance. And whilst we're there, it's our position on merit, isn't it? So long may that continue. But I've not got any expectations. I know there's a lot of people claiming, Ipswich fans crowing about, none of us expected this. We would have dreamed of it, and it's brilliant to be part of it. But no one's kind of came into the season expecting it. To your point about the resources and the pyramid.
Do you know, for kind of judging where Ipswich are at, I'm kind of having to have a bit of an internal battle where it's like instinctively...
Us too.
Yeah, it's like instinctively I just want to get all in on Ipswich and say, yeah, they're in for top two because of how highly I rate Kieran McKenna and what I love that's going on there. And then I think I'm trying to introduce a bit of balance to that, and sort of understanding the challenges that Ipswich have still got to overcome. But I do want to come on to Kieran McKenna, and sort of from the point of view of an Ipswich fan, and knowledge of the history of the club and everything. Where does Kieran McKenna rank in the sort of post Bobby Robson's Ipswich Town managers, based on what he's achieved so far?
Yeah, so what he's achieved so far, Gab, is a really great start in the Championship. Post Bobby Robson, no one has managed in the third tier. We are a club that has rarely ever been lower than the second tier. So I don't want to badmouth the achievements from last season, but it was the third tier. And so,
Sure.
we've had we're a highly resourced team, an effective coach that we're obviously talking about now. So the odds were very much in our favor, but you need to put all of that stuff together. So now, in terms of where he ranks, is really based on the Championship for me. We've put that foundation in place. He's got a lot of stuff excellently right. But now is the real test. And let's be clear, in my time watching Ipswich Town, George Burley is probably the benchmark in terms of a Championship manager getting that promotion.
And then finishing 7th and getting Europa League football.
Fifth. We finished 5th. Part. We went into the last day of that season, Gab, with the chance of Champions League football. Can you imagine being? I mean, and again, in terms of talking about
Champions League, you're having a laugh, Jeff.
No, I know. Champions League, you're having a laugh.
Jeff Horsfield ripped you to shreds, mate.
Wow, he didn't in 2001. That was the season where we just tore everyone apart, and that this season has that feeling about it at the moment. But we're only in, quite rightly, as you say, just about to get to October, so nothing's done yet. But yeah, post Robson, I mean, his reputation is huge. I mean, what we hope is that he sticks around and creates a legacy here. This is a 5 to 10 year project, like Robson had, like Burley had to an extent, and we're building a statue of him, alongside Sir Alf Ramsey and Sir Bobby Robson. It's not impossible at this stage, Gab. We all know the modern game is very different, though. But right now, in terms of what the eyeball test that I see, having watched Ipswich since the early 90s. This is just unprecedented. We've had this sporadic success like that 1990, 2000, 2000, 2001 season. But this is just, in terms of the relentlessness of it, and the way we're going about it, the surprises that we constantly have, this season is slowly becoming one of my favourites.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you to judge things based on what's been achieved on paper as of now, it's difficult to have that conversation. Certainly with talking about post Bobby Robson, or even George Burley, who got you 5th in the. I did say 5th that time in the top flight.
Very, very, very quickly, because someone posted this earlier and shared it in our we've got a messaging group for our podcast. Under Paul Hurst, Paul Lambert, and Paul Cook combined, Ipswich played 170 matches and won 52 games. That's a win percentage of 30.5. Under Kieran McKenna, we played 90 games, so just a little bit less than half, won 54 times, so the same amount in half the games, and have a win ratio of 60%. The stats just are constantly stacking up in terms of what this team is doing, Gab, and I'm all here for it.
Absolutely. I think in terms of achievements, McKenna yet hasn't got past Mick McCarthy in terms of getting a top six. Well, I'm saying
you shall not be named.
No, facts don't care about feelings. Rich.
Yeah, of course. He's got a 6th place finish, 14, 15.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right.
That's the point that I'm making.
We just don't like to hear it.
The reason I'm pointing that out is to kind of highlight how ridiculous that feels, because Kieran McKenna, in terms of the way that he's connected with fans, in terms of the quality of coaching that you can see, it's just evident that he's on his way to great things, and I think that's hugely exciting. Rich, who are the players for Ipswich who have just been, the key ones to what you've achieved so far?
I mean, no surprises really. Nathan Broadhead is the first name that springs to mind. Was a game changer for us in last winter or January when he came in. We just couldn't break teams down. He is just such an expert at finding the pockets of space, getting a shot away as well. He's our top scorer, creates for us as well. And there's always a bit of a question mark over fitness, but he's generally he's making it through games, and then we can bring someone else on who's going to knacker the opposition defenses. Someone like Amari Hutchinson, who's also making an impression on loan from Chelsea. I know you've mentioned the defensive stuff at the back. We have got the joint highest number of clean sheets in the league, but most of them have come on the road, actually. So we've kind of got this weird Jekyll and Hyde kind of defensive thing. But Luke Wolfenden has made the step up as much of us expected him to do so.
Yeah.
Really classy centre-back, likes to get forward as well, generally being on top of stuff. And his centre-back partner, Cameron Burgess, who most of us expected to be replaced. We've obviously brought in Twanzebe, but he's also making a real contribution to Gab.
Yeah, no, he won a lot of headers at Wednesday. I tell you, the thing that I liked was the sort of pattern of play where you had, I think Morsey is the left centre midfielder, Luongo is the right. But you had this interesting dynamic where sometimes Luongo would actually go over to the left and link up with Morsey. And then you had Harry Clark stepping into midfield and Connor Chaplin dropping in. And that allowed you to create an overload on the left.
Don't give it away, Gav. Stop giving it away. They're listening. Darren Moore's listening. No. Yeah.
Well, it's one thing knowing what it is.
Well, it's one thing. So it's another thing stopping it, which is where you were going. Yeah, spot on. And you mentioned two players there as well who I need to shout out as well. Sam Morsey and Massimo Luongo have been amazing for us as well in centre mid. Morsey's missing on Saturday, but he's already racked up 5 bookings, which is his style, which is fine with us, But Luongo is just a free signing, kind of on the scrap heap a little bit of Boro. Came in, had a bit of a trial December last year, and has just made a massive impact. But you're right. What we do is generally it sounds a bit hipster to say, but we've kind of got this asymmetric back line where Leif Davis will essentially operate as more of a left wing back and push forward.
Yeah,
Harry Clark doesn't go as far. He does get forward, but Luongo's smart enough to drop into that pocket, and Burgess will kind of drift inside as well, outside. Sorry, a little bit to fill in the gaps too, so Davis doesn't get. We are getting teams who are going to counter against us. We've conceded goals like that, but it's working really well, and that fluidity of the system, particularly amongst the front three as well. Burns, Chaplin in particular likes to kind of roam around as well. Broadhead too. They find the pockets of space. They get ahead of the striker Hurst. It's a really fluid system. It's great.
Yeah, and the depth as well, because like you mentioned Amari Hutchinson earlier, but it's felt like he hasn't had to hit the ground running straight away in what I think was his first senior loan, because it was almost like you're kind of dripping him into the 11, and I actually feel like that's kind of worked better. But you've got Amari Hutchinson there as an attacking midfield option who's prodigiously talented. If Leif Davis gets injured, you've got Brandon Williams, Jack Taylor scoring a belter the other night, and do you drop Luongo? It's lovely dilemmas, and I think that depth could be really important as well.
Yeah, probably the only question mark, and again, it comes back to your point about the resources of other teams, is whether George Hurst has scored a couple. And Freddie Ladapo has made a contribution as well, but whether they are of the same stature of strikers that are playing around us, I think George has got the potential. Freddie works really hard, but that's probably where we've got the question marks. Brought Dane Scarlett in on loan from Spurs. Didn't really set, the mixed loan spell at Pompey is probably the fair way to put it. So there's maybe question marks about that, but the great thing about this team is that the number 10s will score if the strikers aren't. So that strength and depth is important. And as I said last night, 10 changes. Marcus Harness has made 3 assists last night. He assisted every one of our goals last night. Players like Elkan Baggett, George Edmondson as well, who can come in as well at centre back. That it's not maybe a Premier League quality squad just yet, but there is that depth as you mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose you've mentioned the Premier League, the words Premier League, and I weirdly I kind of feel like although Ipswich have shown the potential to possibly really surprise people and go even bigger than possibly even strap to the top 2 if you get a fair wind, there's also part of me thinking, would it be too early? I think that 10 years ago you had back-to-back promotions where them lot over the road, I'll call them as it's you, and Southampton did this as well, where they went back-to-back, and I think both of them stayed up in their first seasons, whereas I feel like given the financial disparity from the Premier League in this era, it's probably a little bit harder to make that work. So it's like you're kind of enjoying the adventure, but I almost think you'd rather have another season in the Championship. But it's lovely to be having this conversation, I guess. seems to have frozen slightly. Hopefully we'll get him back soon. Give me one moment. So we're still live. Hopefully we're going to get Carl James. Hoping to get Carl James on in a moment. Just bear with me one moment while we sort this out. This isn't the funnest bit, is it? I need to send a link to him. Hopefully we're going to get Rich on back in a moment. Hopefully we might get Rich back on another device. I think in terms of Ipswich, what's really impressed me has been the quality of coaching from Kieran McKenna. I think that's been great. I feel a bit for Brandon Williams actually, because when Leif Davis got injured at Sheffield Wednesday, he was forced off through injury, and Brandon Williams did a great job, and he looks like he's so quick over long distances. Good to have Rich back. Thought you when I went to the Premier League, it looked like he had.
I got scared, mate. Yeah, you got too excited. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
You're about to suggest the wheels might fall off like my internet. That's never happened before. I apologise. Sorry.
No problem at all. Just talking about Brandon Williams, really, because I love his. He seems to be a bit like Leif Davis, so quick over long distances, and it's great to have that sort of continuity if Davis becomes absent, so that the dynamics of the team don't change if it's Brandon Williams coming in.
Yeah, well, the other thing that he offers that Leif Davis doesn't have, I think he's a right footer playing left-sided, so he likes to cut in as well. He's also figured out a really good relationship with Amari Hutchinson, so this kind of substitution situation that we could have, because Davis, as you remember last season, was withdrawn at kind of 60, 70 minutes mark because he got his fitness up. They're a really good pair as well. But yeah, he's aggressive as well. He was really good last night against Wolves. There was a point where we were a bit naive, stepped off them, and Williams got in with a few naughty tackles, probably borderline, and that gave us a bit of an edge as well, which sometimes we lack. So I really like him, and I think he could be really impressive for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk to you about Harry Clark actually, because he looks like someone who's really impressed me, sort of stepping into midfield, because he's so aggressive, and you can see in the post-match scenes as well of some of the games, he's always, the way he celebrates, you can see how much it means to him. I bet he's a real fan's favourite, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's an Ipswich boy as well, and it really shows. He scored his first goal for us last week, cracker against Blackburn, and yeah, he's kind of inherited the Luke Chambers fist pump. But yeah, he had a bit of a shaky start. He was carrying an Achilles injury, which I think he's had to deal with. But he's started to come back into his usual self, and him coming into the team. I mentioned Nathan Broadhale earlier about his impact in January, but Clark was similar actually in terms of just driving us up the pitch. He had a really good connection with Wes Burns.
Yeah.
And yeah, Clark definitely likes to get forward. Maybe not as much as Davis, but he's starting to contribute as well. Maybe he doesn't get the assists that Davis does, but yeah, really valuable. And again, that aggression that I mentioned about Brendan Williams is also evident with Harry Clark. And at this level, sometimes you have to make the games a bit of a dogfight, and Harry Clark does enable us to do that, as well as being a really talented, really energetic right-sided player.
Yeah, lovely range of qualities there. We did mention George Hurst earlier, Rich, and he's done very well in League One previously with Portsmouth and with yourselves. I suppose the step up to the Championship was the question after he joined permanently from Leicester. How has he found that step up?
Yeah, I mean, he's had injury issues as well, unfortunately. Came back into the team against Blackburn, his former side, obviously, and scored and shoved it in their faces a little bit, I think. But yeah, I mean, he's got a good physicality, probably underrated in terms of his ability to play back to goal, but probably just needs a bit more end product, I think. And there's maybe a little bit of naivety. He got involved in a lot of fouls and scraps last night, where he might have got the benefit of the doubt hadn't he had he been pulling on the defender's shirt. I kind of thought he was a bit harsh, and other people around me were saying, well, he likes to back in and he likes to grab shirts and stuff like that. So he needs to be a bit cuter, maybe. But in terms of his instincts, he's obviously genetics is helpful there. He's got his dad knew all about hitting the back of the net. He's not maybe at that level yet, but scores all types of goals. Great in the air, obviously big physical presence too, which is important for us. And I think he's playing for Kieran McKenna as well. He's been coached by a really excellent coach, and that will only work in his favour as well. It seems he's quite keen to settle as well. He's had an endless loan spell, so to finally actually be able to call somewhere home permanently is probably a really big thing psychologically for him too.
Yeah, I think that's what he needed. Listen, Rich, it's been great to wax lyrical about Ipswich, because I'm sure we've had some tough chats which were a bit, where Ipswich were weren't the best. But so it's been great to talk about a really good Ipswich side, and I just hope the Blue Army can enjoy this journey for the rest of the season and beyond.
That'd be great. Yeah, thanks for having me, and apologies for the technical difficulties.
Oh, no problem at all. Look forward to having you on soon. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Delighted to bring in my next guest, which is Carl James from the excellent Do Not Scratch Your Eyes podcast. How are you, Carl?
I'm very well. Talking of technical difficulties, here I am in my car again.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Thanks for accommodating us. Just wondering how you're feeling as a Watford fan right now, because it's a club that I suppose for younger generations of supporters, they're used to seeing this club in the Premier League, and I guess is there a case of maybe the older generation possibly being the more patient lot and the younger probably having more instant demands for this campaign?
Yeah, spot on. Absolutely spot on. Since the Pozzos have come into Watford, fans have pretty much seen success from that moment onwards. Being of I'm 40, I remember some really bad times in the mid 90s being a Watford supporter. So I've seen it. So it's not too uncomfortable for me at the moment, but there is a big frustration in terms of the ownership and what the expectations are at the club. For me personally, I think we are a championship side in terms of the size of our club, and the Premier League, being in the Premier League is punching above our weight, and it's just trying to find that I guess happy medium for fans to understand that a little bit in terms of we're not spending money this year, but I don't think the Championship is. I think there's a lot of teams who are in a similar vein of finances who are not throwing money at it, and it's difficult to take, I guess, but especially for a Watford supporter who sees Luton Town in the Premier League currently. It's always going to be difficult to take for us.
It's normally the other way around, isn't it?
Yeah. Traditionally, we've always been above them. Of course, we're enjoying them struggling a little bit, but they're still in the Premier League, and I think when you add all that onto last season and how it ended for us, that's where the frustration's kind of born from.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you make of Valérien Ismaël's start to life at Vicarage Road?
For me personally, I'm entertained, which is a big plus. We haven't had that for a good few seasons under the, I don't need to tell you guys about our management situation and how we like to spin managers. I'd be really disappointed if we did spin him this time round. I think he's a guy that I would like to see develop at the club and get a style that we're used to and an identity. I don't know what we are as a football club, and that's disappointing. So I'd like him to be given an opportunity to show an identity and given a chance, really. But in terms of the football, it's been good. The displays have been good. We've been a little bit unlucky in a few games, barring the Leeds game recently that's just gone past. That's the only time that I've really seen us outplayed and outclassed. But I think Leeds this season will probably do that to a few teams.
Sure. I suppose the standout for Watford so far this season has been Matthijs Martins. Were you expecting him to have this impact on the Hornets?
He was awful last season on loan, so it's really good. He's done really well. Looks a cut above not too good for the Championship, but a player that will no doubt go on to do something else. He's only on loan from Udinese. My big fear is with them struggling in Serie A, will they recall him in January? So that's the only worry for me. But he's probably shone out, and I think the other pleasing thing for me is we've had a few young players come through. Morris playing left back, who looks a player, and that's a big thing for Watford Football Club. We haven't had youth coming through and pushing the players that we've had through. So that's something nice. But yeah, Martins, I would agree, would be a standout this season.
Yeah, absolutely. What have Watford got to do? As much as we've talked about some of the positives and some of the encouraging signs we've seen under Valerian Ismail, Watford are still 16th, which I would say on balance isn't where fans will want to see their team come the end of the season. So what's got to be done at Watford to make sure that you continue to improve?
Consistency. I think it's the same. The Championship's a bonkers league at the best of times, but just a bit of consistency. There's we're looking like we can score goals now. We've brought in Rikovic, Danish lad who's come in and started well, scores goals, physical guy, looks tailor-made for the Championship. So it'd be good to see him develop this season. But goals has always been crucial for us. We haven't looked like we can score goals this season, so having him in and doing well is going to be important. I think any team that's going to do well in the Championship needs a player that's going to score you 15, 20 goals a season, and if you haven't got that, you are going to struggle. So for me, it's just goals, and don't concede as many.
Well, that would certainly help, wouldn't it? Listen, Carl, hopefully Watford can continue to pick up in terms of results, and hopefully catch up with you later in the season, mate.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Carl. Delighted to bring in my next guest, Dan Ainsworth from Rovers Chat. Not seen you for a while, Dan, because of logistical circumstance. Good to have you on the pod. How are you, mate?
Yeah, it's good. Thanks for having us back on, Gavin. Nice to speak to you again. I wish we were speaking a bit more about a promotion chasing Rovers at the moment, but been a mixed season. I'm sure we'll get into it, but glad to be back on as always.
Yeah, great to have you on. I suppose there was a lot of optimism at Blackburn after the progress made last season. Why would you say, Dan, that so far, and we are only 8-9 games in, that some of that optimism has perhaps dissipated so far?
I think it's been just the nature of the results and the way they've come. Rovers have picked up some really good wins. The 1-0 at Watford, I thought, were a really good result when arguably we didn't deserve it on the day. But then you look at games like the Hull City one when we had 10 men for 75 minutes. I think it was more frustration. The 3-0 at Plymouth, I'd argue Rovers deserved to win, which sounds really strange when you lose 3-0, but we missed a lot of chances at 0-0, didn't take them, and then we lost, which I guess is a bit like Carl was saying there, that when you're conceding goals at one end and not putting them in at the other end, you've only yourselves to blame. And then the 4-3 at Ipswich, Rovers got 3-1 down in the first half. The keeper makes 2 mistakes, I'd say, for the goals. The negative side starts coming in, and then you pull it back to 3-3, and you can only start thinking about you winning the game, and then you lose it to another keeping mistake. So I think the disappointments come from Rovers are costing themselves, not by playing poorly. We're playing well. We've got an identity, which is something we spoke about in the summer. It's just we're costing ourselves with a little mistakes. And I think it's frustration more than anything else that we know we can play well. We've played well even in the games we've been battered. Well, battered by the goals, that is. It just feels like if we can finally get these players in and get the new signings in, which we've not seen too much of, then we'll actually start to click and show what we can do and hopefully have a similar year to last year. Although I don't want that end of the season again, because that's not good for the heart, especially down at Millwall.
Yeah, for sure. What have Blackburn got to do then to sort of make sure that things pick up? Is it partly ironing out some of those defensive issues? Because I look at the last few games since hitting 8 past Harrogate in the EFL Cup and winning 1 Watford, it's 3 at Plymouth Argyle, 1 against Middlesbrough, 3 against Sunderland, and 4 at Ipswich. So clearly, there's defensive deficiencies for Jon Dahl Thompson to address.
Yeah, I think the struggle for me this year has been the midfield. We're asking the midfield 2 to do a lot more. Lewis Travis and Adam Wharton. You know, last year the midfield 2's role was kind of pick up the ball and don't let us concede. But this year he's asking for them to. He's got Lewis Travis being a box-to-box midfielder, which for me he's never been and never will be. With all respect to him, he's more of a. I think you should have Lewis Travis as being that stopper in the midfield and let Adam Wharton go on and be the man who's going to pass and create all the chances. So for me, the midfield's been the issue, but the striker role's been the issue. I'm not sure on the stats now, but it was something after we played Plymouth. I think we'd had 24 more chances in the box or something than everyone else, more touches, and it was like we're not showing it on the goal front. And it's the early goal that's cost us. If we go 1-0 up, I'm very confident Rovers will win a game. If we start missing them chances and we get to the 20th minute where we've missed 3 or 4 chances, I'm like, you just know what's happening with Rovers, and that's kind of been the thing. I feel we're lacking confidence in our keeping option. Interpairs had a really mixed season, some really good moments and some really down. Up front, it's just not connecting. I imagine it will at one point, but is it going to connect too late in the season where we're then just playing what effectively feel like 10 or 15 dead rubber games? I worry that when it comes to February and March, Rovers aren't going to have anything to play for, and it's going to be one of them where we're just sat there looking ahead to another year.
Do you think, Dan, that probably the issues that we've talked about up top probably can be attributed to the club maybe not doing enough in that area in the summer, or putting too many eggs in the basket of Niall Ennis? Because at the moment you seem to have relied quite heavily on Sammy Smodics continuing on his excellent form from last season. But yeah, Harry Leonard is such a young lad. Sam Gallagher is quite limited. Is that a tricky position for Blackburn at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. I feel it's the thing that's going to cost Rovers. You know, if we're sat here at the end of the season discussing wherever Rovers finish, I feel we'll be saying, look, if we had a 15 to 20 goal striker, like Carl mentioned, if you get a 15 to 20 goal striker, we're sat here. And I know they're not easy to get. And Rovers went into the window with a lot of optimism, made 3 really early signings, and then a few financial issues come in with the owners. And now we were sat there on deadline day waiting for a striker. And although this striker might be the one, we signed Telilovic from Borussia Mönchengladbach, although he might be the one, you kind of sat there thinking he's probably going to need a year to get into English football. He's going to need that year to properly work. He's shown signs that he kind of knows how we play, but I feel we're asking too much of someone who's never scored a goal above the third tier of German football. So Rovers have got to be clever financially, and we, like most clubs to be fair now, but we've got to come into this and we've got to find a new Neil Maupay, someone who comes from one of these leagues, you've never heard of him, and suddenly he's firing 20 goals. So this year we knew it was going to be a risky signings. You look at Arno Sigurdsson, who scored at Ipswich in his first game. He looks to be a real talent who probably shouldn't be playing for us. I feel we'll be looking for goals more from the free and behind the striker than the actual one who leads the line this year.
Also, Ryan Hedges has impressed me so far with some of his creativity as well, and he seems to be able to come inside from the flank and open things up. I mean, so there's definitely excitement with that 3 in behind with Sigurdsson, Smodics, and Hedges.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, Hedges is out now for 4 months, which adds another bit of issues. But Rovers, this is it. I feel that a bit like when we had Broughton Diaz, where he was playing on the left and scoring the goals, we're sat in the same position we were 2 years ago of saying, oh, well, we've got the 3 in behind. It was Bradley Dyke, now it's Sammy Smodics, that man in behind. You've got Tyree Stalling out wide, Markande, Hedge, all these who you feel can influence the game. But then you look at if you play your striker through on goal, are you backing him to score at the rate the others do? And you're not. And you mentioned Harry Leonard, who I think's had a really good start. He scored twice, involved in the goal at Ipswich. Really, he would have one who forced that on goal. So he's had a really positive start. But how much can you put on a 19-year-old to go and score the goals you need to fire you up? For me, I think this is the perfect year for Harry. He's coming with not much expectations on him. Got 2 goals already. That one at Ipswich as well. If he plays regularly through the season, I think he'll hit double figures, which would be a really positive year. But people will look and be like, but we're missing that one. We're missing that one. And we'll go again next summer and maybe in January and try and find that striker. But how many good strikers can you get?
Well, also, I think the fact the club's brought in 2 strikers and promoted Harry Leonard, that it probably shows that they maybe don't have the money to go out and buy a sort of unknown quantity. So they are going to have to try and work with what they've got and hope an Ennis or a Televic can sort of find that form. But let's hope that's the case. Listen, Dan, great to have you on the show. Hopefully catch up with you on later in the season, and best of luck to Rovers, mate.
Thanks for having us, Gab. Always a pleasure.
Brilliant stuff. Dan Ainsworth, of course, from Rovers Chat there. Go check out them out. They do some brilliant stuff. This has been EFL Debate, the Championship podcast. Thanks to you for watching at home, and we'll see you again very soon.